This is my video documentation for my assignment where I've had to make a Space Invaders or a Blackjack game, and I have made a Space Invaders replica, so I will show you how I have created this game. I've set it out in an easy layout. I've obviously got a main menu first, because that's the first thing you see in a video game, and then I have set it as the level 1, which is an easier level. I've set it as level 2, which is pretty similar to the original Space Invaders, and then I've set a boss which drops nukes at in the third and final level. Because instead of going with the old retro game, I've decided to have it as a World War II game because this assignment is based for me on creativity, and that's what I've tried to do. The game that I've decided to name is Red Sky. I've got a start game button and an exit game button. Now there's no point me clicking the exit game button because the game will exit. Now, right, this is a problem. Okay, so I've accidentally put 2 players in when I don't need to. So obviously this is a bad start. So what I've got to do is I've got to go to the level 1. And get rid of you. Yeah, well, now that I've had to do that, I'll go on the topic of the rooms themselves. So, obviously, in the Space Invaders, your character could not just go to the top of the area and just shoot all the enemies. It had a certain limit that it could go to. This is what this wall is for. This bottom wall is so that the player can only go to about here. It can't just, because if I didn't have this wall, the player would just be able to just fly up here, shoot everyone, and the players wouldn't be able to, and the enemies wouldn't be able to move because they're set at a certain timer and they're set to go in a certain direction. Now, also, it is a bit too easy just to have the player just shooting them and the enemies not shooting well and just shooting back, but obviously the player can move and the enemies can't. So what I've done is in the original game, if the enemies reached at a certain point, then the player would lose. So this white box here is like a border for, like, since my game is World War II related or just World War related, like say you're the Americans and the enemies are gonna try and attack your your border. So let's say this is the borderline. So if the enemies hit that, the player will lose the game and the game will exit. So I will try that again. Hopefully, that I will not have 2 players in the game when I should only have 1. Now, obviously, I focused more on the sprites than the actual coding because there's not that much coding in this game at all. I've added a menu to it which takes a little bit of coding, but only so that this cursor here can actually move around with the actual game. And obviously I will show how the menu works in a sec. Now that I have 1 player, I can play this game properly. As you can see, we're flying over the sea, which is what I wanted it anyway, because in the sky, in the wars, you're going to be flying over the sea and islands and stuff. And as you can see, I've got a health bar in the bottom left corner. So obviously, if I get hit, like I will about to show you, if I get hit by an enemy, my health goes down. Now, this doesn't work for these enemies because I haven't put a health bar on because I thought that'd be too difficult. So I've made these enemies basic, and as you can see, it looks very similar to the old Space Invaders game. Now hopefully I don't die in my own game, that'd be a bit awkward. There we go. And as you can see, when you kill all the enemies, a message comes up saying you've defeated the enemy, you win. And then it'll automatically go on to the next level. Now, this is where my creativity kind of came in. I decided to make a boss for the actual game. So I have made him shoot normal bullets like the regular enemies would, but instead I've actually made him shoot nukes as well. So he's a bit more intimidating, and the nukes do a bit more damage than regular bullets. And obviously, he's got a little health bar at the top, so if he gets hit, then he dies. Now, if he gets hit by this, he will explode. That little animation is meant to explode, and then a timer is meant to be set before this message comes up. but I haven't actually set it right yet. And then the game will abort because I haven't added any more rooms, so the game will end just there. Now, main topics I'm going to talk about in this documentation is my main menu, and then my character creations, and then the room creations, and then the health bar, which is here, and then the controller, so all my objects work, and the next room command, so it will always set to the next room, and then I will go through the boss and how the bullets are fired and all of that. Now, on the creative side of things, the sprites weren't hard to make, but I wanted it a pixelated 2D art style, so that is what I created. And the first thing I did when I started this game is I made the player, because that's the main point of the game. So what I did is I made a basic shape of a plane, and I originally painted it all brown and then all green. So each section was brown, green, or green, brown. And then I pixelated it by what I did is I used a website called Piskel. Now, Piskel is a website that really focuses on 2D art and pixelated art. So what I did was, as you can see, this is my player. He's upside down, but I turned him around in the original Game Maker file. So what I did is I'll focus on one point. I originally made it all brown, so like this, and then I used this tool, which is a lighten and darken tool, where you use Control and Shift to darken and make it lighter. So I used the smallest size I could, and as you can see, if you keep just pressing Control, it actually pixelates the plane. So instead of just having to do one cube at a time, you can actually just pixelate the entire plane, and it looks a lot better. That's how I did it. So I'll just undo all of that so it keeps the original. And then I also did basically the same concept for the sprite enemy, where I basically had it as the same sprite as my player, but I changed the colors and I put red and black logos on, so it seemed a bit more intimidating, so the players would know that it is the enemy shooting at them. Now, going on to the topic of shooting at them, I had to make bullets. So for the player gets a gold regular bullet, it's not really difficult to make. You just do a black line, a gold line, and a yellow line, and just have it as a cube. But in the game, it actually looks like a bullet. And then, obviously, for the enemy bullet, I decided to make it kind of like poison bullets instead. So just to add a bit more creativity to it. And then for the enemy, the big boss that you saw, he has missiles, which I actually did try and focus on a lot, because I realized that the original boss would have had just normal bullets, and that's not really intimidating. So I tried to focus on, I used Piskel again, and I decided to just do an outline of a nuke or just a bomb, and then just pixelate it. So just a lot of yellow, a lot of light green and white, and then just use the lighten up tool and just pixelate the entire thing. So as you can see in the game, it works very well. Now, onto the topic of the main menu. What I've had to have done is I have made the buttons red, because red for blood, and the name is Red Sky. But I've also done a sub-image of a lighter version of the button, so that when the cursor or the mouse clicks on the button, it changes to the lighter one, so it looks like it's been pressed on. And I've also done the same with the play button or the start game button, and I also made a custom cursor so that it would, just be a bit more creative again. And it's just a basic hit marker, like a line of sight that you get on a gun. And also, what I've done is I've obviously made a background because we're going to be flying over the sea, obviously. Now, I made this on Piskel yet again because Piskel is really helpful. It's free and you can make all the designs and stuff. Now, obviously, I made the sea. I filled it with blue, and then I drew the brown island on, and then I drew the green, and I just pixelated the entire thing. So afterwards, I had all that. I made the room, but I had to make the room size 900 by 1200 meters, not meters, pixels, so it will fit the actual picture. Else, it would have just had two pictures of the same thing, and it would have looked weird. Now, going on to the main aspects of this is the objects. Now, for the player, I had to do, obviously, when the player hits the wall that is covering him, he will stop moving. He will, and at a speed of 0, so he stops. So he can't move past that point. Obviously, when he goes left, he goes left. When he goes right, he goes right. When he goes up, he goes up. When he goes right, he goes right. And when he goes down, he goes down. And when you press space, I've had to set it. I've animated it so that obviously when you press the space bar, obviously the bullet object, so your bullet, it gets fired, and it can fire at least 20 times before it stops. Now I could change it to make it go slower. I could change it to make it go faster, but I decided to keep it at 20 because it is more fun. I've had to use blocks, so if I didn't have the blocks, it would just create at least 20 at the same time, and that would just be too OP for the actual player. So, and then obviously create an instance, make the bullet. Now, what I've done this also for the enemy, but obviously the enemy, you're not controlling it. So I've had to use alarms, and I've had to set them each time. So alarm 0 is when the enemies will shoot you. So I could have had with this thing here, I could have had it with every 1 out of 4 chance a bullet will fire from the enemy, but then the game will be really, really slow. So what I've done is I've put it as 2, so it's a bit more of a challenge for the player. And then obviously start of it, then it will make how many there are, and I've set that to like every 30, which is half a second. And then alarm 1 is to create this explosion effect where every time the bullet hits you or hits the enemy, they will fall down and they will explode. Now it will be playing a sound, but I haven't actually added that yet. So obviously, when the enemy gets shot, destroy the instance. And I've set that to 30 as well, which is also half a second. Now I've had to do a collision with the bullet. So when an enemy is collided with the bullet, it changes an instance to object 12, which is the sprite of which is actually I will show you, which is the sprite of the falling enemy. Which, as you can see, he falls down and then explodes. So what I've had to have done is I've had to add a bit of code in. So I've put the alarm speed, and I put the alarm 1, which is what this alarm is, and the room speed of 0.3, which is about quarter of a second, or no, half a second, sorry. And obviously when the enemy hits the borderline, it'll end the game. It will display a message, and the message is they broke through your defense, you lose. And then the game will restart when it will go back to the main menu, and then you can either play again or you can click exit to get off the game. Now with that, I've had to have coded the sprite buttons on the main menu so that when the left button is clicked on the play button, it will go to the next room. And then when it goes over the play button, it will change to the second image, so it's a little bit lighter, so it looks like it's being pressed. And obviously the speed at 0, because we don't want it to move from that point. And then obviously when it leaves, it changes to the original image that it had. Now, I'll also have to do this for the exit button. I'll have to change this to subimage 1, which is the lighter version, and the speed of 0. And then when the mouse leaves, I will have to have it back to the original at subimage 0, so it can stay as the normal font that it already is. Now, going on to health. Health was a bit difficult. I had to ask my teacher to help me on this. But afterwards, after he taught me how to use it a bit, I got the grasp of it and I carried it on. So you set the player health bar to 100, because that's what you want. If it's smaller than 1, which is 0, so if the health is at 0, that means it starts a reaction. So you start the block, it displays a message saying you died, and then it will restart the game. It won't restart the level, it'll restart the game. And then obviously that will end that sequence. And then what I've had to do is you've got to draw the health bar onto the map, and then I've added obviously the instructions for the health bar, so it can actually be coded into what it's doing. Now, object controller is basically how you win the level. Obviously, if a number of enemies is gone, if the number is 0, so basically when you kill all the enemies, it will display this message saying you defeat the enemy, you win, and then it'll go to the next room. And then with the next room command that I've had to have put in, basically this is for the boss, so the big plane that fires nukes at you. When the boss dies, so basically when there's no more bosses, when there's only one, it will display a message saying you defeat the enemy, you win, and then it will go to the next room. But I haven't added a next room, and then what I might actually do, now that I've mentioned this, is I'm going to change it to end game, or restart game, actually. Yeah, I'll restart the game. So it'll display the message, and then it'll restart the game, and then that's that. So, and then also with the missiles, now what I've had to have done is instead, the normal bullets for the enemies, they take off -10 damage, and then, but for the nukes, I've set it to -20 damage, and then, so the nuke just doesn't fall through the map and is endless. I've had to destroy the instant when it gets outside of the map. And then the score, so basically when you hit an enemy, you'll get about 50 score on, and then obviously that goes up, and then when you destroy the boss, you get 150 score instead. So what I've had to have done is to make the explosion happen after the falling enemy animation has done, I've had to set a separate alarm so it can destroy the enemy, and then it can create an explosion, so it will explode. Now, what I will do is I will add a sound into it when it's done, and I will add sound 1, which is an explosion. So I will add that in. So when I show you the game again, hopefully the sprites, when they die, they will make that sound. Is there anything else for me to show you? Yes, the big boss. Now, I've had to, obviously the big boss is a separate